All right. Welcome once again. And this video is going to be about why I think logical consistency matters in storytelling. So, my thought process. So, my last video on the Eva rant got me thinking about logic and storytelling and how a lot of people try to justify bad logic by saying that, oh, the story's fictional. You can't expect, fictional stories that have all these crazy things, superpowers, giant robots, kaiju battles, fantasy realms, fantasy races, and so much more. You can't expect that to be logic. They're so different from the real world. And my response to that is that it shows that people just do not understand what logic is at a fundamental level. And to rectify that, I created this video. So, what is logic? So, this is the definition from Merriam-Webster. Logic is a science that deals with the principles and criteria of validity of inference and demonstration. It is a science of the formal principles of reasoning. So basically logic are just the rules of inference for all thought in all areas of life. So when people make the statement that fictional stories shouldn't follow logic because they're fantastical, I think they don't really understand the different distinctions in the philosophical literature about the different types of logic. So let's go through it. So the strictest, I suppose you could say, would be what's called physical possibility, and that's pretty much like the laws of science. So like the laws of physics, chemistry, biology. Consider the equation E equals mc squared, ideal gas law, PV equals nRT, laws of biogenesis. All life comes from pre-existing life. So this is what called physical possibility, and the laws of science pretty much just govern what is seen in the real world. But there's deeper logic, as we will see. So then we have what's called metaphysical possibility, and this can get a little tricky to define, but I think it's best seen in example. So consider the statement, water is not H2O. Now, we know that it's false that water is H2O, but but that statement by itself does not break logic in the sense that, say, a married bachelor or a squared circle would break logic. It is possible that the statement water is not H2O does is not strictly logically possible. But given the nature of reality, that we know that water is the combination of two hydrogen atoms and one oxygen atom, the water is H2O by definition. Now, another example is the prime minister being a prime number. That statement does not break logic like, say, a squared circle would. However, given the nature of reality, we know that there's just no way in any version of reality in which prime minister is a prime number. And as a quick side tangent, I'd say that the existence of God falls into this as well. The statement that God does not exist technically is logical, but given the nature of reality, God will exist in every possible version of reality. You will understand what that means as we continue with this lecture. So, this is the broadest form of possibility, logically possible. This governs everything that is possible, the real world and every possible world. And there are generally three basic laws. And I'd say not even God can break these laws. And we'll discover what these three laws as we continue. And basically, you may have noticed I use words like possible world, reality, and that's basically terms that are used in what's called modal logic. And that's basically breaking things down into the categories of what's necessary and what is contingent. Necessary is basically exists in all possible worlds or consider every version of reality. Contingent are things that either exist in the real world or don't exist, but could possibly exist. So metaphysical possibility and logical possibility are necessary. The physical possibility, basically the laws of science in the real world, they are what's called contingent. They did not have to be so. So consider E equals mc squared. While that is true in the real world, there is a version of reality in, say, E equals mc cubed that does not break any logical law or any metaphysical law as well. So it's just what's called E equals mc squared is contingent. It is not metaphysically necessary or logically necessary. So this is just a picture that explains it. So you see that physical possibility is at the lowest end, and then you see it's engulfed by metaphysical possibility, and then metaphysical possibility is engulfed by logical possibility. So it's physical possibility is the least strict, then metaphysical possibility, and then the broadest form is logical possibility. So let's use an example from a story. Consider the Flash. Now, super speed is a superpower that just, according to the laws of science or like physical possibility, it breaks so much. So basically, inertia, the Flash can move at supersonic speeds and stop on a dime. He doesn't have to slow down. He can travel faster than light, which breaks with relativity theory. He can interact with objects at high speeds without causing any damage. He can pick people up, move them at high speeds. Doesn't have to worry about whiplash or anything like that. So according to the real laws of science, the Flash's superpowers are very illogical. However, it does not break logic, and I believe that intuitively readers knows this. But I think this is grasping readers. You often hear this phrase if you listen to people talk about stories. You hear the phrase often that the rules of the universe don't have to follow our rules, but it should follow its own rules and not break them. And I think that means, and I think that's just tapping into the understanding the difference between what's physically possible, so what takes place in the real world, or in the broader logical possibility, which governs basically the real world and any possible world that could take place, and that includes a fictional story. And even crazy powers like Toon Force, they don't break laws of logic. So consider something insane, like I've seen a GIF of like Bugs Bunny tearing out like I think Florida with like a saw. Even as crazy and fantastical as that, that actually does not break any laws of logic. So that is not illogical. So what are the laws of logic? So I mentioned there are three basic laws of logic, and logic can go from 0 to 60 real quick. Believe it or not, there are actually like disciplines in philosophy where people are what's called like trained logicians, and that's just like their job is just to do logic. You can see all these complex what's called symbolic logic and like logical proofs. Obviously, you don't need to if you want to tell a story, you don't need to understand symbolic logic and be able to do like 30-page logical proofs. But I think the three basic laws, which we're about to touch on, can honestly be a great help. So the three basic laws of logic. The number one, the law of non-contradiction. A statement cannot both be true and false at the same time and in the same sense. So you cannot have A and not A in the same time, in the same sense, in the same way. That is illogical. Two, the law of identity, basically that states that anything is identical to itself. So that means A is identical to A. And if A and B are identical, that means they have the same properties. There's nothing different between them. And then the C, which is the law of the excluded middle, which states that for every proposition, either it or its negation is true. So basically, there's no middle ground between truth and falsity. Every proposition is either true or false. There is no middle ground. No half true, half false. It's either true or false, binary. So let's look at the Flash and the three laws and what would break the laws of logic for him. So the law of non-contradiction. So the statement the Flash is faster than light and not faster than light at the same time, the same sense, that is illogical. That breaks the law of non-contradiction. You cannot be faster than light and not faster than light at the same time in the same sense. Not logical. The law of identity. So I know that there's lots of Flashes, Flashes in DC, but just for the sake of argument, let's say Barry Allen is the only Flash. So, law of identity. The Flash's secret identity is Barry Allen and not Barry Allen in the same the Flash's secret identity is Barry Allen and not Barry Allen in the same sense. That is illogical. The Flash cannot be Barry Allen and not Barry Allen at the same time. That breaks the law of identity, the law of excluded middle. The Flash is either faster than light or not faster than light. Or the Flash is either Barry Allen or not Barry Allen. There is no middle ground between these. The Flash cannot be both the statements that Flash is faster than light and not faster than light cannot both be true. The Flash cannot be Barry Allen. The Flash cannot be Barry Allen, not Barry Allen. That cannot both be true at the same time. There has to be a middle ground. either true or false. These statements are either true or false. There is no middle ground. That would break the law of the excluded middle. So why does this matter? If your story is illogical, your plot, themes, characters will be hard to understand. Storytellers try to sound deep, so they like to talk about mysterious things like fate, causality, etc. However, mysterious does not mean logically contradictory. I gotta say that again. Mystery does not mean logically contradictory. You could have mystery in your storytelling, that's fine, but you shouldn't be logically incoherent. That is not a mystery. Your story just does not make sense. So, examples. I could list examples of what I consider bad logic from various media, but I guess we would be here all day because there's a lot. So I'm just going to talk about some philosophical concepts that are explored in an illogical way. So, common ways logic is broken in storytelling. Except I'm not going to talk about the most common one, which is time travel, because the philosophy of time, that's for another post. So excluding time travel, we're going to look at some other common ways. So manipulating causality. So causality can be complicated like many philosophical concepts, but there's a basic definition given by Merriam-Webster. So it's either A, or a causal quality or agency, or two, the relationship between cause and its effect, or between regularly correlated events or phenomenon. So that is causality according to Merriam-Webster. And you see there's a certain superpowers that are supposedly can manipulate causality and how it works. So, is manipulating causality, is that power logical? Well, it depends on what you mean by that. If you mean reversing an action that reverses the effects of another action, then sure, that happens in real life all the time. So consider you get like a coffee stain on your shirt and you put the shirt in the washer and in the dryer and it comes out good as new. That technically you reverse, in a sense, you could say you reverse the causality of the coffee staining your shirt. There's nothing illogical about that. That happens all the time. And however, if you mean making it so that an action that took place in time never actually took place, then no, that breaks the law of logic, particularly the law of the excluded middle, and actually cannot have taken place in time and not have taken place at the same time. That is illogical. Either the action occurred or it did not occur. There is no middle ground. That breaks the law of the excluded middle and thus is illogical. Second one, manipulating Platonic concepts. So yeah, this post definitely cannot give a robust explanation of Platonism, but the very basic idea is that the things that commonly referred to as concepts, say hope, beauty, love, and etc., they exist in some spaceless, timeless, transcendental, what Plato termed the world of forms. And things that are in the physical world, they're just imperfect reflection of these forms. So basically, the physical world is an imperfect reflection of some higher transcendental world that exists outside of space and time. And the cave allegory is often used to help understand his form of Platonism. So, is manipulating, quote, Platonic concepts logical? Once again, it comes down to exactly what you mean when manipulating concepts. If you mean you have the power to reverse things like death, destruction, etc., fine. I believe that is completely logical. I believe that too. So say like, Christ defeated the power of death at the cross. There's nothing illogical about that. That's completely logical. However, if you mean that a character has the power to destroy like, metaphysically real concept of death, life, etc., then no, that is not logical. That does not make sense. By definition, these Platonic concepts exist outside space and time, and thus cannot be destroyed as if they're physical objects like a car or like a phone or whatever. They can't be destroyed. If you take what's called Platonic realism, they exist outside of space and time. I don't believe that even God can get rid of Platonica. Like, can God destroy the number three? I would say no. That's not logical. The number three, if you take Platonic realism to be true, would exist spacelessly and timelessly. And even in the concept of the Christian version of heaven, it's not like I wouldn't say God would destroy like metaphysically the concept of death and sadness and hope. It's just that in heaven, those things people just don't experience those things anymore. It's not like they've been destroyed in some super metaphysically robust sense. That's not logical because by definition they exist outside of space and time and thus cannot be manipulated in that way. Destroying concepts is just illogical and should not be in stories. So, The whole concept of manipulating quote unquote platonic forms, that leads me to what I think is the most logical concept I've seen in storytelling, and that is manipulating the concept of fate. So, fate manipulation. This comes up often because it seems the free will and determinism that seems so important, and I've actually written about it before. Link in the description. This might be the most important philosophical concept because of how much it affects. It affects everything. Free will affects the concept of justice, morality. Why be good if everything is predetermined? It affects concept of justice. Does it even matter if everything's been predetermined? And for obvious reasons, storytellers love to talk about it a lot. But unfortunately, I think that a lot of the logic that is used in discussing this concept is just not very good. So stop if you've seen this. A character in a story is quote unquote bound by fate, but through willpower, they overcome it and able to change their fate. Maybe not just their fate, the fate of their friends, their allies, and quite possibly maybe even the fate of the entire world. And then the thematic message is that yes, predetermination is true, everything is predetermined, but with enough willpower and strength, you can break through fate and make and forge your own path. And the character, just like in your face, fate, destiny, woohoo. However, there's just one problem. It's not logical. One issue is that fate is not really defined, but in a lot of stories, it seems fairly clear that's referred to be determinism. And like a lot of philosophical concepts, there are competing definition of determinism, but one really good one is that determinism is defined as antecedent state of affairs that are sufficient to necessitate every event that occurs. And then I just take that definition from the Standard Encyclopedia of Philosophy, which you can see. I'm not going to read it, but you can see it right here. So problems with fate manipulation. Given the SCP definition of determinism, which I read, it is literally not possible to fight against your fate in any way. If what's called prior states of affairs, so basically like prior versions of descriptions of reality, think of it like that, determine actions, then your actions are caused by those prior states of affairs. So everyone in the story that's quote unquote fighting against their fate should only be doing what they've been determined to do if fate controls everything in the verse. If that statement was hard to understand, it should be because it's illogical. If someone is quote trying to just fight against destiny, fate, what have you, their actions against fate will be predetermined because if determinism is true, then it's been predetermined. So them fighting against their fate is just illogical. It should not be possible if determinism is true. So you see more characters with supposedly have the power to manipulate fate. So what would work is a character that's quote fighting against their fate actually proves that determinism is false and that libertarian free will is true. Events are not determined by prior conditions, and persons have a certain degree of control over what occurs. But that is usually not how it works. It's usually how it works, like I said before. The characters triumph over the concept of fate, and somehow through their own willpower determination, they beat it. But that is illogical. And to me, I think a story that affirms free will is real, and that fate does not mean that everything is predetermined is a more valuable thematic message. I've often said that the point of a fictional story is to reveal truths about the real world, and I don't believe everything is determined in the real world. I believe strongly in free will. So I think a story that strongly promotes that libertarian free will is true for everyone is a more valuable thematic message than characters just triumphing over fate or anything, and it is logically coherent. So I could go on. Free will determinism might just be the most interesting philosophical concept because, like I talked about before, it just covers pretty much all aspects of our lives. But this is just really supposed to be an introduction to logic. I'll talk about free will versus determinism a lot in the future. So in conclusion, logic governs all that is possible. It is the foundation for all rational thinking in all areas of life. Meaning that includes fictional stories. So that means fictional storytellers should not abandon it when crafting their tales. The point of fiction is to reveal truths about the real world. I just said it. And that is very difficult to do when your story is not logically coherent. If you want your audience to understand your story's plot and themes, logical consistency is key. If your story is illogical, your plot, your themes, and even your character motivations, they can be hard to understand and maybe unintelligible. When a story is logical, all the other elements of the story are much better, and it can make more resonate for the audience more strongly, and that's why it matters. So, tip to all future storytellers: don't abandon logical, stay logical. Thank you very much.